Tonight on Nova, building the Panama Canal. It was the largest single project ever undertaken. The fulfillment of a 400-year-old dream, the biggest story of its day, and still a focus of world attention. Join author David McCullough on a journey through this masterpiece of engineering and the great human drama that produced it. On a man, a plan, a canal, Panama.
Major funding for Nova is provided by this station and other public television stations nationwide. Additional funding was provided by the Johnson & Johnson family of companies, supplying healthcare products worldwide. And by Allied Signal, a technology leader in aerospace, electronics, automotive products, and engineered materials.
Dawn, 9 degrees north of the equator, a crossroads of the world, and one of the most extraordinary human achievements of all time, the Panama Canal, a 50-mile shortcut to the Pacific that changed the course of history. I'm David McCullough. The Panama Canal was begun in the 1880s, and had it been built somewhere else, somewhere safe and convenient, in Ohio, say, it still would have been the engineering marvel of the age. Its magnitude was so great, its ingenuity so remarkable. But here was the place to join the oceans, Panama. And Panama then was one of the most difficult and deadly terrains anywhere on Earth. And it's this, quite apart from its importance as a world thoroughfare, that makes the Panama Canal such an extraordinary story. Panama was the setting not only for an engineering landmark, but for much political intrigue and great human tragedy.
Cristobal Signal, Royal Viking Sea.
¿Cómo se llama? Royal Viking Sea, good morning, go ahead.
Good morning, Cristobal. This is the Royal Viking Sea. Our ETA to the breakwater is 0600.
For information, you are scheduled to get pilot at the breakwater entrance.
Every day, ships of every kind from every country line up for their turn, according to instruction. Passage begins at the Great Gatun Locks, the Caribbean entrance to the canal, a turn-of-the-century triumph that was built to last. When you think of all that they didn't have, no bulldozers, no chainsaws, no modern medicines.
They were far ahead of themselves, and the technology at that time, they must have had a view into the future. The engineering of the canal is just fantastic.
How many ships do we have going through today?
Well, we have quite a few southbound, Captain.
A couple of big ones in there.
Have we cleared immigration, customs?
I'll check.
For most present-day ships of the sea, the locks offer little room to spare.
Thrust the bow to port.
Every move is as practiced as a dance step.
Hey, Rule, I have to make a wide approach and I keep the stern off, so let me know how she looks on that knuckle. Get up close.
Okay, what's it?
One voice commands, the pilot.
Midship.
Midship.
As many as 6 electric locomotives guide the ship through the locks.
You can let go there now. Hard to port again, please.
Hard starboard.
One center, pick up your slack. Okay, Mahaffey. Let me know when the shoulder's inside the knuckle, please.
You got about 101 to go.
Okay, starboard engine dead slow ahead.
Dead slow ahead.
Very good, wing plate on one side. On the way.
It isn't just a big trench, this canal.
it's not like what many imagine. A ship doesn't simply sail through Panama at sea level. It is raised by a system of locks to the level of a large man-made lake.
One center, slow boil in.
The locks are like a giant water elevator or water steps that lift ships a total of 85 feet, as high as a 7-story building. Passage from sea to sea is really up and over Panama. This is the genius of the engineering. The locks are among the most massive structures ever built, and the most interesting. Far more goes on here than meets the eye, since so much is hidden below water.
Half power to South 16 Zulu transit. We're clear of Gatun. Thank you very much.
The canal was the moonshot of its era, and as so often happens in great enterprises, success or failure turned time and again on the elusive factor of personality. The story begins in Paris in 1879. Experiment and innovation are signs of the times. It is the Paris not just of Monet and Offenbach, but of Eiffel, Pasteur, Jules Verne, and of the beloved Count Ferdinand de Lesseps, builder of the Suez Canal. He is vivid, vital, ageless at 74. His triumph in Egypt 10 years earlier was cause for huge celebration. Verdi composed Aida in honor of the occasion. To his countrymen, de Lesseps is Le Grand Français, the great Frenchman. He had defied the experts who said the task at Suez was too big, and he succeeded with an unobstructed 105-mile passage dug through the Egyptian sand at sea level. He was also married a second time that same year of 1869 to a beautiful young woman who produced 12 children, an achievement considered in some circles more remarkable even than his Suez Canal. At an international conference at the Société de Géographie in Paris, he reveals his plan. He will give the world another canal, complete the circle begun at Suez, with a canal through Colombia's Isthmian province of Panama. On a voyage from New York to San Francisco, it will save 8,000 miles, compared to rounding the Horn of South America. His route will follow the Little Panama Railroad, just 50 miles from sea to sea. On paper, it looks easy. The distance is half that of Suez. Panama, he says, is the one place in Central America where a canal at sea level, like Suez, is possible. So, Panama it must be. De Lesseps has never been to Panama, nor is he an engineer. He is a master entrepreneur of boundless confidence. His friend Jules Verne has said, Ferdinand has the genius of will. Then, as if in a play or a novel, a man rises to say any plan to dig a sea-level canal at Panama is doomed. He is Gaudin de Lepinay, a French engineer who has had experience working in tropical America. Panama is a death trap, he says. It is poisoned with disease. Even so, he has an ingenious plan. Amazingly, he describes the canal that will one day be built. Canal with locks and a large artificial lake. But his audience thinks the idea preposterous. Why build a canal so needlessly complicated? De Lesseps is the man of the hour. He will lead the glorious Panama enterprise. He will go to the people of France for the money. He will go to Panama. The wonder is the French accomplished all they did. They faced a wilderness as dangerous as it was beautiful. There was sawgrass that could shred skin like a razor. Smothering heat day after endless day, and mud and swamp. Days and nights were made a living hell by ticks, chiggers, spiders, ants, mosquitoes, and flies. The men worked in constant fear of poisonous snakes. And there was the rain. Panama has just 2 seasons. On his few visits, Ferdinand de Lesseps came and went only in the lovely dry season. Nothing could have been more different from the arid wastes of Suez. There was much too much water everywhere. The looping Chagres River could rise 40 feet in 24 hours. The half-dozen settlements along the line were primitive at best, with precious few comforts of home. But for many of the first French workers to arrive, there was high romance in such adventure in a strange and distant land. They began by clearing a path several hundred feet wide the whole way across the isthmus, cutting the jungle by hand, a tremendous task in itself. They made test borings, calculated the volume of excavation to be done. Then the digging began. No one knew quite what to do about the Chagres River, which would have to be crossed repeatedly, and no one seriously thought the job would be easy. But then no one contemplated failure either. Their faith in progress was total. De Lesseps promised that as problems arose, men of genius would step forward to solve them. Science would find a way. Wasn't this the 19th century? So morale was high, pride and confidence built by the kinds of equipment being marshaled for this, the greatest constructive undertaking ever attempted. The engineers and technicians were rigorously trained and as fine as any in the world. The maps and records they produced are invaluable to this day. Every month brought more of them. And they died, as if in war. They died of smallpox, typhoid, snakebite, food poisoning. The vast majority died of malaria and the dreaded fièvre jaune, yellow fever. Still, others followed bravely to take their place, all for the glory of France. One ambitious young engineer who was to play a large part in the story, Philippe Bonavarilla, said, "We are soldiers under fire. Let us think only of the fight tomorrow and of victory." Harper's Weekly posed a question. Is Ferdinand de Lesseps a canal digger or a grave digger? The mortality rate among hospital patients was 3 out of 4. Of the first group of French nuns on the hospital staff, 24 Sisters of Charity, 2 survived. The pretty little French hospital on the slopes of Ancon Hill overlooking Panama City was well equipped and well staffed. But there were no screens in its shuttered windows, and in the gardens, flowering plants were protected from the ravages of ants by crockery rings filled with water. A perfect arrangement, it so happens, for breeding the mosquito then called Stegomyia fasciata, the carrier of yellow fever. The danger of the handsome creature was not yet understood, or the peculiar fact that its ideal breeding place is in fresh water held in artificial containers. The cause of yellow fever, like malaria, was believed to be the noxious vapors of decaying waste and vegetation. Doctors advised newcomers to avoid the night air. In 1886, Ferdinand de Lesseps, now 80 years old, arrived again to declare unequivocally that the canal would be built. He posed with his devoted engineers on the long palm-festooned piazza of the Chateau de Lesseps, resplendent in the keffiyeh of an Arab sheik, a memento of his glory days in Egypt. The old hero put on a brave show, but time was running out. His engineers had the facts. Costs were out of hand, the work woefully behind, beset now by terrible mudslides. The longer the digging went on, the more it seemed they had to do. No way had been found to cope with the Chagres River. Part of the problem was the kind of training the French engineers had received. They had been taught to achieve solutions by computation. They had never learned to improvise in the way that seemed second nature to American engineers. Of the death toll, scarcely a word was said. In the plaza at Panama City, thousands stood in the broiling sun for the chance to cheer Ferdinand de Lesseps. They never achieve anything who do not believe in success, he liked to say.
The French were 10 years in Panama, during which they lost 20,000 lives, perhaps even more than that. But the death toll was not what stopped them. The money ran out. The size of the task was simply too great for private financing. No matter the charm and optimism of Ferdinand de Lesseps, no matter the dedication of the French engineers. Had de Lesseps not insisted on a canal at sea level, maybe things might have turned out differently. But he tried to repeat his success at Suez here under conditions that were entirely different. He ignored his best advisors. He discounted reality.
The collapse of his canal company when it came in 1889 was the biggest financial failure in history until then. Thousands of trusting investors lost their life savings. The government fell, and Le Grand Francais ended his days in disgrace, a dim old figure tucked away in a country house. For years afterward in France, the very word Panama was to mean swindle, wasted lives, unspeakable national disgrace. All that was true, but there were other reasons for the failure, reasons beyond anyone's control. The French effort simply came too early. The technology needed, as well as the medical science, just wasn't ready in time. Still, the French did about a third of the job needed for a Panama Canal. They were the pioneers. Late in the summer of 1901, 12 years after the bankruptcy of the French Canal, an assassin's bullet ended the life of President William McKinley. And all at once, America had a new leader, Theodore Roosevelt. "Now look," said Senator Mark Hanna, "that damn cowboy is president of the United States." Roosevelt, the youngest chief executive ever, had much he wanted to do. He believed in sea power as a ruling force in history. He dreamed of an American Navy commanding 2 seas, with an American canal in between. American engineers had already achieved amazing results with the building of the Western railroads, the Brooklyn Bridge, and skyscrapers like New York's popular Flatiron Building. Once the Senate authorized the president to take up where the French had left off at Panama, Roosevelt could hardly contain himself. But then Colombia began balking at the terms proposed, Panama still being very much part of Colombia. And it looked as though negotiations might drag on interminably. What resulted was the so-called Panama Revolution of 1903, staged by a half-dozen prominent Panamanians with shrewd coaching from the French engineer Philippe Bunnevarilla. Success was instant and bloodless. because an American gunboat, Nashville, appeared on the scene in time to keep Columbia from landing troops, which Columbia had every right to do. Any doubts about how it would all come out were short-lived. The whole affair was over in less than a day. Panama knew which flag to wave. No president had ever exercised gunboat diplomacy in such flagrant fashion, or made the work of the cartoonists quite so easy. For a while, Roosevelt tried to defend his actions with legal arguments. Later, he dropped the pretense and told an adoring crowd, "I took the isthmus, started the canal, and then left Congress not to debate the canal, but to debate me." On Wednesday, November 18, 1903, in a house on Lafayette Square, two men sat down to sign a new canal treaty, Secretary of State John Hay and the ever-resourceful Boonevarilla, who had now managed to have himself made Panama's special envoy to Washington. No Panamanians were present for the historic moment. For a compensation of $10 million, the United States was empowered to build a canal through a new canal zone and had the right to act as if sovereign within that zone, in perpetuity, meaning forever. It was all anyone in Washington could have hoped for, yet hardly so in Panama. As John Hay conceded privately, there were many points to which a Panamanian patriot could object, but the bargain was already signed and sealed.
The cry in the United States now was to get on with the job, to get down to Panama and make the dirt fly, as they said. And again, as in the French time, patriotism was a driving force. Here is what a New York reporter wrote when he got to Cologne. "There is nothing in the nature of the work," he said, "to daunt an American. I've made 3 excursions over the canal route, and while I do not pretend to speak expertly of the engineering aspects of the problem, I should say that the building of the canal will be a comparatively easy task for knowing, enterprising, and energetic Americans." In truth, the first year of the American effort was a fiasco. There was no organization, nobody had a plan, nobody seemed to know what to do. The food was bad, morale was terrible. When yellow fever broke out, hundreds fled for their lives, as the French never had. Nor was their attitude helped much when the new chief engineer arrived on the scene. He was an American named John Findlay Wallace. He came with his wife, and they brought with them 2 metal caskets. Within about a year, during which almost nothing of any value happened, John Findlay Wallace quit, which was the best thing he could have done, because it meant the appointment of a new chief engineer.
He was John Stevens, a big, hard-driving man with a blunt frontier manner and a reputation at age 52 as the finest railroad engineer in America. He had built the Great Northern through the Rockies. He told the men he wanted all excavation stopped. The first step was to make it a fit place to live. They liked him at once. In less than 2 years, he worked something of a miracle on the isthmus and saved the canal from almost certain disaster. To Army Dr. William Gorgas, Stevens was an act of providence. Unlike the French, Gorgas now knew that yellow fever and malaria are carried by mosquitoes. He had proved the point by eradicating the yellow fever mosquito in Havana after the Spanish-American War, working with Dr. Walter Reed. But in Panama, he'd been able to accomplish almost nothing. He had no money to work with, no official support in Washington. One powerful admiral, whose medical ideas were as out of date as his mutton chop whiskers, knew absolutely that mosquitoes had no connection with tropical fevers and refused to allocate money for window screens. Now, Gorgas was to have whatever he needed to clean up the place. He found himself leading the most costly, concentrated health and sanitation campaign the world had yet seen. Orders went out for 1,000 brooms, 4,000 buckets, carbolic acid, mercurial chloride, 8,000 pounds of common soap, 120 tons of insecticide. Stevens personally signed requisitions for $90,000 worth of wire screens. Cleanup brigades were recruited. It was an all-out assault on pestilence of every kind, using every known technique. Houses were fumigated from top to bottom. Drainage ditches swept clean. Streets were torn up for new sewers. Streets and sidewalks were paved for the first time. The contrast could be dramatic. Piped water was provided, and sanitary drinking cups. Brush was cleared from living areas, swamps and marshlands drained. Oil was sprayed to check the breeding of Anopheles, the malaria mosquito. First things came first, before the digging. Living quarters went up. Clubhouses, commissaries, whole communities offering most all the modern conveniences in a tropical wilderness 2,000 miles from home. Stevens wanted nothing fancy, just accommodations good enough to attract the kinds of skilled men he knew he would need, married men preferably, and life made pleasant enough for them so they would want to stay for the long haul. His workers were soon enjoying such luxuries as fresh eggs, lettuce, even ice. A bakery was built capable of producing 4,000 loaves of bread a day. He knew how big his workforce would have to be before the job was over. It was John Stevens who saw the real lesson of the French experience, the futility of trying to dig all the way down to sea level. It was John Stevens who best explained to Theodore Roosevelt how a lock and lake canal would bridge the isthmus and make a virtue of Panama's phenomenal rainfall by damming the Chagres River and creating a man-made lake. This way, most of the digging would be concentrated at Culebra Cut, the point where the canal cut through the highest ground. Roosevelt could now picture how a ship would be lifted up to the lake through a series of locks like steps. The system was brilliant because it was so simple. Each chamber would fill by a flow of water from the lake above. The one force at work was simple gravity. No pumps were required. Roosevelt might have insisted on a sea-level canal. It was what many in Washington wanted. But he listened to Stevens, and well, he did. Had the United States tried to build a sea-level canal, the project almost certainly would have failed. Stevens' great creative contribution to the engineering of the job was a system of railroads that probably no one else could have devised. A project intended for ships became one of the biggest railroad undertakings of all time. He knew the real task was not the digging, but hauling the dirt. This meant moving it by rail, hauling freight. He brought in bigger equipment than the French ever had, and far more of it. By his system, the dirt trains rolled endlessly. The objective was to keep the steam shovels working without pause. To keep pace with the shovels, tracks for the trains had to be moved again and again by brute labor, until a steam contraption called a track shifter was improvised to pick up and swing whole sections at once, doing the work of 400 men. The trains were made up of flat cars with only one side. At the dumping grounds, a 3-ton steel plow was hauled forward from the head of the train by a big winch that took its power from the locomotive. So a 20-car train could be unloaded with a single sweep. The spoil, as they called it, was hauled off to build the immense earth dam at Gatun. The damming of the Chagres River would create the largest man-made lake in the world. At the extreme ends of the canal, pilings for huge breakwaters were sunk, then filled in with tons of rock and dirt. Whole towns were to be built on hundreds of acres of landfill. By December 1905, Gorgas was able to announce there was no more yellow fever on the isthmus. It was hard to believe, but true. The year after, Stevens had 24,000 men at work, and Theodore Roosevelt decided to come look things over. He came in November, the peak of the rainy season, because, he told reporters, he wanted to see conditions at their worst. In 3 days, he traveled up and down the whole 50-mile route of the canal. He talked strategy with Stevens. He posed for a famous picture at the controls of a 95-ton Bucyrus shovel, mainstay of the work. He wanted to know everything about everything, to hear what the men had to say. He told them, "You are doing the biggest thing of the kind that's ever been done, and I wanted to see how you were doing it."
Then, all at once, something entirely unexpected happened. John Stevens quit. Nobody could quite believe it, and to this day, his reasons remain a mystery. It was said that he had become bored with the work once he had everything running so smoothly. It was said he had uncovered some terrible scandal and therefore wished no more association with the work. It was said he missed his family, that he wanted more money, that in fact he disliked Theodore Roosevelt. The best evidence is that he was overworked and broke under the strain. In any event, an extremely angry Theodore Roosevelt, determined to have no more chief engineers walking off the job, appointed a man who couldn't quit, an Army officer, Colonel George Washington Goethals.
Goethals was a different sort from Stevens. Stevens was informal, often profane. He dressed in old overalls, boots, and a battered felt hat. Goethals was spotless, a picture of West Point formality, even in civilian clothes. To many, he seemed a cold fish. His staff, beside Dr. Gorgas, now included 2 other important Army engineers, and they were assigned 2 colossal tasks. Colonel David Gaillard would command the excavation at Culebra Cut. Colonel William Seibert was to build the Gatun locks. Goethals and Dr. Gorgas were at odds almost immediately. Goethals, concerned about cost efficiency, thought the sanitation campaign was badly managed under the easygoing Gorgas and made a study to prove it. "Do you know, Gorgas," he said, "that every mosquito you kill costs the United States government $10. "But just think," Gorgas replied, "one of those $10 mosquitoes might bite you, and what a loss that would be to the country." The sanitation campaign continued as before. Goethals' value was enormous. He ran things magnificently. He and the other Army engineers had built locks and dams before on American rivers. Their professional background could not have been more appropriate. Again, as in the French time, everything came by ship, including those who would do the heaviest work. Except now they came mainly from Barbados, sometimes 1,000 or more on a single ship. For them, no special accommodations were provided. The pay, however, was considered excellent, 10 cents an hour for a 10-hour day, 6 days a week. The main point of battle was Culebra Cut, a 9-mile gouge through the high ground where 30 years before the French had concentrated much of their effort. A visitor wrote, "He who did not see the Culebra Cut during the mighty work of excavation missed seeing one of the great spectacles of the ages." With the work at full blast, the United States was digging the equivalent of a Suez Canal every 3 years. In any one day, there were 50 to 60 steam shovels in the cut. Along the entire line, about 200 train loads a day were being hauled to the dumps. The average total excavation in a day was greater than the French had been able to dig in a month. By noon, temperatures at the bottom of the cut hovered around 120 degrees. One steam shovel operator remembered it as Hell's Gorge. Death and injury were commonplace. place. Men were caught beneath the wheels of trains or struck by flying rock or blown to bits. Dynamite got tender from standing too long in the sun. One premature explosion killed 23. In total, more explosive energy was expended in blasting through Panama than in all the wars the United States had fought until then. There was rain and rain and more rain. And the mountains began to slide. Avalanches of mud and rock plunged to the bottom of the cut. Steam shovels crushed like toys. Miles of track were obliterated. In 1912, after one of the worst slides on record, Colonel Gayard was beside himself. Goethals was called to the scene. "What are we going to do now?" said Gayard. "Dig it out again," said Goethals.
The deeper the cut went, the worse the slides became. One man described digging through the unstable geology of Panama as like running your hand through a bin of grain. The more you dug, the more came down. Engineers talk of the angle of repose, that point at which a slope has been cut back far enough so that nothing will come sliding off. Unfortunately, that ideal state has never been attained here. Landslides are still a problem.
Life in construction days became highly stratified, and not without its compensations for the engineering officers at the top level. At the bottom level were the ordinary day laborers, all foreign. By 1912, the workforce numbered 50,000. Less than 10%, however, were Americans. Most were English-speaking West Indians. The dividing line couldn't have been clearer. Foreign, black workers were paid in silver. American, white employees got gold. Beyond payday, everything else was demarcated according to gold and silver. As in much of America then, all was quite separate and seldom equal. The Americans were the locomotive engineers, surveyors, machinists, electricians, and foremen. They were the school teachers, nurses, police, and paymasters. The pay was good. Clerks and bookkeepers started at $100 a month. A graduate civil engineer at $250. A steam shovel engineer got $310, plus the glory of the job. There were baseball leagues, band concerts, outings at the beach, and lazy Sundays. For most, it was the time of their lives. As work proceeded on the Great Locks, the true grandeur of the canal's concept became apparent as never before. The construction sites looked like something from the time of the pharaohs, or as D.W. Griffith would have filmed the pharaohs. To deliver the wet concrete, a spectacular cableway was devised with 85-foot towers on tracks so they could be moved as the work progressed. Sand, gravel, and Portland cement were fed into a mixing plant by one automatic railroad, while another carried full bucket loads to the cableway, where they sailed off to their destination at a speed of 20 miles an hour. For the locks on the Pacific side, tremendous cantilever cranes were used instead of a cableway. But the idea was the same, to keep the work area free of everything except the big steel forms within which the concrete was poured. Unlike the pyramids or the Great Wall of China, these monumental structures were no mere matter of putting stone on stone. had to be built first in the negative with the forms. All the locks were constructed in 36-foot sections. The big forms, also on tracks, would then be moved to the next position. And since numerous inner chambers, passageways, and culverts were required, the job was anything but simple. The volume of concrete poured for the Gatun locks alone, somebody figured, was enough to build a wall 8 feet thick, 12 feet high, and 133 miles long. No structure in existence contained such a quantity of material, said Colonel William Seibert very proudly. With an overall length of 1,000 feet and a width of 110 feet, each lock was considerably bigger than a ship the size of the Titanic. In fact, a single lock chamber, if stood on end, would have been the tallest structure in the world, taller than the Eiffel Tower, taller even than the new Woolworth building. One lock chamber could have held 3 Statues of Liberty end to end, with room to spare. The water was to flow in and out of the chambers through main culverts as big as railroad tunnels. The valves in these main culverts were composed of twin gates that weighed 10 tons apiece. Water would be fed to the chamber floor by small cross culverts that were themselves big enough to admit a 2-horse wagon. The giant steel gates were by far the largest ever built. The gate leaves weighed 700 tons on the average, but were hollow, constructed like ships, so they would be buoyant once the water was in. Once the water was in, they could be swung with no more than an electric motor of only 40 horsepower, half the horsepower of a Volkswagen engine. Indeed, the locks are a pioneering use of electric motors and electric control systems. With all their moving parts, the locks will be giant machines. An idea of how much industrial technology was involved is in a single statistic. In the city of Pittsburgh alone, 50 different mills, foundries, machine shops, and specialty fabricators were contracted to produce the rivets, nuts, bolts, steel girders, steel plates, forms, and roller bearings to make the gates, which were then shipped to Panama in pieces. On May 20, 1913, 2 steam shovels, as battered as if they'd been through a war, met at the bottom of Culebra Cut and sounded their whistles. The canal was as deep as it would go. The last concrete was laid at the locks on May 31, 1913, and with Gatun Dam nearly finished, whole towns along the canal route were now being taken down, struck like stage sets and carried off. Once Gatun Lake was filled, generators at Gatun Dam would produce the electricity to operate the locks. So the canal would provide its own power. And with the end of the task now so nearly in sight, Panama became a #1 attraction for tourists. They came by the thousands. One was 10-year-old Charles Lindbergh Jr. traveling with his mother. Remembering his excitement years later, Lindbergh would write, "The very name America made one think of miracles. We had conquered a continent. We had abolished slavery. We had developed the automobile. We had invented the airplane. And now we were building the Panama Canal." Trial lockage at Gatun was made by the tug Gatun in October. The grand opening came the next summer, August 15, 1914, when the steamer Ancon crossed to the Pacific. Almost inconceivably, the canal had been finished ahead of schedule, and it cost less than estimated. No graft, kickbacks, payroll padding, no corruption of any kind was connected with the work. A phenomenal feat, and largely because of the leadership of George Goethals. But no single construction effort in American history had exacted such a price. The cost was $352 million. French and American expenditures together totaled $639 million. In present money, more than $7 billion. The human cost since 1904 was 5,609 dead, of whom not less than 4,500 were black workers. The canal was open to the world, and in time came the ships of the world. Everything from square riggers to submarines. There was J.P. Morgan's yacht Corsair, the liner Kroonland, and the Empress of Britain. The passage of American battleships from sea to sea left no doubt that Theodore Roosevelt's dream had come true. In 10 years, the canal was handling 5,000 ships a year.
Roger, South 16 Zulu, vessel goes to sea. We have no harbor and no north.
Some operations today, like the Traffic Control Center, would baffle the original builders. Yet most are essentially the same as when the canal opened. So superbly was everything thought out. The complete 50-mile crossing takes approximately 9 hours. On the Pacific side, the locks are divided. The first at Pedro Miguel, then Miraflores. More than 2,000 ships a year rank now as Panamax size, as large as the canal can handle. Many barely fit through. Other ships at sea are too large for the canal, but they were built for runs elsewhere in the world. Shortly before the canal was finished, a fine arts commission was dispatched from Washington to see in what ways the appearance of the canal might be dressed up or improved upon. The conclusion was to do nothing. The canal would look as its builders intended, no less, no more. In all, it was a masterpiece unlike any other. In the control tower at Miraflores, as at all the control towers of the canal, operators open and close the lock gates, lift or lower ships the size of skyscrapers with a turn of the hand. Pointers stand open as the gates stand open, awaiting the ship's arrival for its descent to the Pacific. Everything that is happening outside happens on the board at the corresponding place and at the same time.
Checking the lines.
As water in the chamber goes down to lower the ship, a water level gauge descends. As the water flows into the next chamber, rising to equalize the two levels, a gauge marks its progress. They were very smart people, an engineer at Miraflores once told me. To transit the Miraflores locks takes 45 minutes. At high speed, it looks like this. Tolls vary enormously.
The largest ever collected was for the Queen Elizabeth II, $99,000. The smallest was for Richard Halliburton, the world traveler and author. In the 1920s, he swam the canal from end to end. The charge was 36 cents. The toll for this ship, the Royal Viking Sea, is about $44,000. The canal remains one of the busiest sea lanes in the world. It carries crude oil, steel, lumber, Japanese automobiles, Canadian wheat, Italian marble. Everything from nails to jet fuel to coffee and bananas. As of the year 2000, actually as of noon, December 31st, 1999, the canal will belong to Panama. Panama alone will operate the canal, which, according to the agreement, will remain a neutral waterway open to all nations. The United States will have the permanent right to protect and defend that neutrality. Whether the canal will be operated as efficiently as it has been in years past, or better, is a question nobody can answer. But to no country is its continued usage and proper maintenance more important than to Panama.
Strung out over 50 miles, the canal is a huge, costly industrial complex operating night and day. Its chief assets are its workforce, some 8,000 people, most of whom are Panamanian, and the simple element of water. Water, too much water, had been the main obstacle at the beginning, and water, all that magnificent Panama rain, turned out to be the very thing that made the canal possible. Every transit, every one of the 12,000 ships or more that take the Panama Passage each year, means the expenditure of 52 million gallons of fresh water flushed from the lake through the locks and out to sea. The canal functions because the supply of water from the rainforest is never ending, and should continue to be so as long as the rainforest is kept intact. The canal works because it works with the natural conditions of Panama. The cycles of nature thus make it a kind of colossal perpetual motion machine.
The need for a ship passage here at the Isthmus of Panama was as plain as day as early as the 16th century. A Spanish priest writing to his king said, "There are mountains and there are hands," meaning the task is huge, but with enough will it can be done. Yet even in the late 19th century, nearly 400 years later, the task proved insurmountable. The obstacles of disease, climate, geology, the sheer magnitude of the work, not to mention the cost, were all too much. The French had all the will in the world, but that wasn't enough. Their timing was off. Science and technology change history, and never more so than in our own time. But science and technology are also the creations of history, and they do not advance in isolation. Had it not been for the Spanish-American War, the breakthrough discoveries on yellow fever would not have been available for application at Panama. Had it not been for the massive railroad construction across North America after the Civil War, there would have been no such resourceful figure as John Stevens, with his technological mind, to step forward and set things smoothly running at Panama. All the electrical components of the locks, the electrical engineering, would not have been available had the canal been started only a dozen years earlier. As it was, the timing for success, right at the start of the new century, was exactly right.
Theodore Roosevelt never saw the Panama Canal. He died in 1919, but he was sure it was what history would remember him longest for. William Gorgas was Surgeon General in the First World War and was later knighted by King George of England for his great work for humanity. George Goethals was Quartermaster General of the Army in the First World War. John Stevens went to Russia in 1917 at the request of President Woodrow Wilson to reorganize the Trans-Siberian Railroad, an assignment of 5 years. Once, he returned to Panama by Pan American Clipper. Asked what about the trip gave him the biggest thrill, he said the ride on the airplane. Of the others, the tens of thousands who were there when the canal was built, nearly all are long gone now. Goethals, when once asked what the secret of success had been, answered, "The pride everyone feels in the work."
Morrison traces the history of map-making on the Ring of Truth, next here on 11.